Welcome to the Cloud Council. Today, we're going to be talking about workplace computing beyond 2020. And I'm delighted to be joined by Graham Watt, CEO of Softcat, and by Mark Chillingworth, a CIO and CTO community editor and commentator. So let's consider the big question. So guys, how must workplace computing modernize in the coming weeks and months as a result of recent events? Let's start, Graham, with you.
Yeah, a great question, Dom. And there's plenty to think about here, because I think what we have seen in the COVID pandemic is that many organizations who'd already adopted a mobile first and cloud first approach were much less disrupted than companies with a purely on-premise play. So I think what's happened here is that everyone's been sheep dipped into this 100% remote working environment at virtually no notice. And as a result, we've all been exposed from, I think, and benefited from the technology. So this is forcing CIOs to have, a lot more on their mind about the workspace. Workspace was already becoming an important part of an infrastructure solution for companies. But I think now CIOs and their IT directors are having to think about devices, about accessories, about identity and access management around the security elements, around productivity tools, collaboration tools, virtual desktop platforms. And I think the wave of demand that we've seen, in the sort of March, April timeframes will continue in the midterm, because I think companies have got to take a rapidly deployed short-term fix. They've got to turn that into something more robust. And I think companies are very much looking at what they're going to do in the longer term. They're forging their plans as we speak. And maybe if I can, it's just worth mentioning what we're thinking about and doing at Softcat. We're planning, and I also recognize that every company is different and we'll come at this from different angles. But what we're doing at Softcat is we're planning to move away from an Office Citrix-based on-premise environment for sales to an entire workforce who are remote working enabled with Cloud VDI. In parallel, we're going to work and determine what proportion of our time should be spent in the office versus working remotely from home or elsewhere. And these plans will give us more advanced business continuity too. And then I think from a customer point of view, what we're seeing, just to maybe help the audience get a sense of what we're seeing customers now asking more and more about smart office solutions. So I think all businesses will start to look at IoT and AI and look at some of the tools available, such as Flowscape and Smart Space, for example. Look at those tools that will help them manage social distancing and isolation in the office. And I think we'll look at, customers are also asking for more interactive management of the workforce. So applications that help companies task manage and time manage their employees whilst they're working remotely, and all of the things that we've been hearing a lot more about recently around employee engagement and well-being tools. All these things are coming into play, I think, and becoming much more relevant. So there's a ton of potential change out there and a whole host of options to consider, I would say.
Just to bring in Mark here and pick on one thing you covered there, Graham, around, we've seen in the main a relatively seamless experience moving from, majority, office-based working to obviously 100% remote working. As you said, some maybe short-term solutions to bridge that gap. What's your perspective, Mark, in terms of, what's been achieved in the short term and what's still kind of to go in the long term?
Yeah, I agree with Graham entirely about that technological switch has not been too difficult for some, and others have had to go on a huge integration exercise to move forward. I think what was missing and what is going to build on what Graham was just saying was the cultural piece. There's a lot of organizations had the technology in place, but they didn't have the cultural elements of accepting and really making the most of home working, remote working, and all of those things. And I think that's going to be a real big play over the rest of this year, really, as we either deal with the continuing situation or hopefully it plays out.
Yeah. And Graham, I mean, you talked about some areas that probably some of the viewers will be will be not necessarily on the to-do list yet, like AI to enforce COVID-19 restrictions in the workplace. But let's talk about you yourselves in Softcat. You've got a big employee workforce, about 1,500, I think.
Yeah.
the office has always been a great, hub and engine of productivity and energy in Softcat. How are you managing to sustain that in this new world, and what you're thinking for the future?
Again, good question, because for those of people who are familiar with Softcat, we as an IT infrastructure solutions reseller, we work in a highly fragmented industry. We're the second largest in the UK, but only 3% share. And so culture is one of the things that actually makes us, we believe, stand out from the crowd. And we put a lot of energy and effort and focus on making sure that our employees are engaged and fully recognized and rewarded, and that kind of spills over to the customer service levels, the outstanding customer service levels they provide. The point of all that being that up to date, the culture has been very much, as you said, Dom, dependent on people being together in offices. So the sorts of things we've been doing now that we're a distributed workforce, fully distributed workforce, is trying to have as much business as usual going on inside the workplace. Recognition for big deals, daily figures, team meetings, all that sort of thing. But we also need to continue to demonstrate we care as well. So we've been surveying our people using a tool called Qualtrics. We've been reaching out to those who need more help through manager support and buddy schemes. We've been giving additional access to mental health helplines, for example. We've also been making sure that our employees are adequately equipped to work from home as well. Different people, we've been leaning on people's own personal IT equipment. And I think the message there is don't scrimp and save. If we're going to ask our employees to work from home and be effective, give them the tools that enable them to be effective in that remote working. We've been doing a lot of messaging. I spend a lot of my time at the moment communicating. We talk very openly about what we're seeing as a leadership team and how we're feeling about things, and trying to get that tone from the top right. And we've got, layered into all of this, it's a lot about continuing to have fun. So on top of all the inevitable quizzes and the fancy dress kind of house party drinks, and we've moved to kind of has Softcat Got Talent. We've had big nights in. We're introducing cooking and cocktail mixing master classes as well. So making sure that we've got a lot of fun going on in the environment as well. So it's something, but in terms of how we look going forwards, we weren't a hugely remote working company. We have a lot of our customer contact is still remote, maybe 50-50. But in terms of working, as I said before, we relied very much on being in the office. So if we had 10 or 15% remote working historically, I think the fact that we're a sales organization and we're strongly reliant on our culture as a positive differentiator in the marketplace will mean we'll never be a remote working company as a default position. But I can see if it is around 15% pre-COVID, I can see that moving to 30 to 40% maybe in the future, give people the ability to manage their home and business lives, a little bit more under their control. But we have to make sure that if we do go down that route, to your point, Dom, that we really look after that culture and we understand which elements of that move will negatively impact our culture and which elements that move will positively impact that culture. So we've still got quite a lot of thinking to do in that respect, I would say.
I think there's a really exciting opportunity for a company like Graham's there as well, isn't there, of enabling that workforce to be, as you said, you're a sales-led organization, to be out there in the various communities that will drive your business in the future, and not so sort of hubbed out of one location. There's huge opportunity in that.
Yeah, no, I agree, Mark. And I think the other thing that's on my mind, so we've started thinking about temporary return to the office. As you can maybe tell, we've started to think, and I think we've got a first proper big discussion about it in a couple of weeks' time about what that permanent return or not to office looks like. I think the other thing on my mind, which I'm not kind of really ready to think about yet, but it's on my mind and on our minds, is if we're changing the way we work, we work as a more distributed workforce, how are our customers going to change the way they work? And does that change the interaction we need to have with our customers? I think the answer is definitely yes. But how is not so clear to me at this point. So we're going to be keeping a very clear focus on not just how we have to adapt to this new way of working that I think we'll inevitably see, but how do our customers going to change, and how does that change the interaction we have? So I think that's all very interesting.
Well, thank you very much again to Graham Watt and Mark Chillingworth for joining me as my guest this week and for your terrific insights into this topic. And thank you to you for joining me again this week. For more business and technology insights, you can visit nutanix.com/CXO. See you next time.